Hi students, this is just going to be an introductory video to what is sport and exercise psychology, what were the origins of it, and then just some really basic stuff from the first chapter in terms of what are people in the discipline investigating right now, and what do we know as really key in terms of goal setting, motivation, and those sorts of things. Okay, students, so you can see where we are right now, that up here on the left-hand side, this guy right here, this guy's name is Norman Triplett. He was at Indiana University, Big Ten member. He was also an avid cyclist, and he was a psychologist. And his huge contribution, he's really known as one of the very first psychologists that contributed to sport and exercise psychology. He did a couple different studies on social facilitation. So what he did in one study was he had kids doing a fishing competition, and he wanted to see whether it made a difference if kids were reeling in their line as fast as they could by themselves, or whether they could go faster if they were competing against a friend. And what he found in that situation was they could reel in more line if they were competing against a friend. Similarly, he is very famous for a bicycle study. He was an avid cyclist, and you can kind of see from this awesome picture that he was an avid cyclist, and he was interested, can cyclists go faster again while they're cycling against themselves, or will they go faster if they're working against others? And what he found was, again, that cyclists were motivated by those around them. So this is the key piece in terms of social facilitation. So this was very early on, 1898 or something like that Norman Triplett had done some of these studies. And of course, the discipline of psychology is quite old and dates from even before that. But in terms of sport and exercise psychology, this is a very new area. It's not that psychologists hadn't studied sport and exercise before the late 1970s, early 1980s, but it hadn't really been taken seriously as a part of psychology. So what you see is that in the 1980s, sport and exercise psychology became its own sort of sub-discipline of psychology, and one of the ways that we could see the growth of the discipline was in professional organizations publishing papers and publishing books on sport and exercise psychology particularly. So one of the organizations, I'm going to make this smaller here, that really demonstrates the growth of the discipline is the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. And this really brings up the question of, who can be a sports psychologist? I mean, most of the things we're going to be talking about in our class are things that you could apply as a coach, as a personal trainer, as a fitness expert, as a healthcare professional, helping people to recover from injury. But we will not be certified and licensed psychologists, nor will we be certified or licensed sports psychologists. That takes many, many years of training, and so we're not going to, you can see on this page, certified consultants, that takes many, many years, and training beyond what we're doing. What we're doing in this course is just to introduce you to some of the techniques that you can use to help facilitate goals and a positive outlook among your athletes, your exercisers, and those that you're serving. So in the Association for Applied Sports Psychology Association, you can see that they have an annual conference, they have an area for students. If you're interested in possibly joining, it's very inexpensive for students to join. And you can see that they hold an annual conference where they share a lot of their recent research. Under the resources tab in this, let me see if I can, under the resources tab in this organization, you can find lots of good resources regarding for coaches, for teachers, and those kinds of things. So you can see resources here, and you can find out lots of good information here. If you click on resources twice for some reason, I've found that you can get to this page for athletes, for parents, for coaches. And if you want to use this information in class or outside of class for some small short papers that could help you understand a topic, this is a good place. So, for example, goal setting, that's a topic we're definitely going to be talking about in our class. Here's just a short little idea about how to make specific goals, clearly identify the goals, give you some examples of goal types, those sorts of things. So the reason this association is considered applied is because they really want to have information that facilitators, coaches, leaders can use to help people, again, have a positive outlook on their lives and also meet their own goals in sport and exercise. Okay, so I wanted to talk just a little bit about the cognitive behavioral psychology and why that's an area that, not an area, but sort of a philosophy that's used most often now in sport and exercise psychology. So, cognitive behavioral psychology has two different components. One is the cognitive component, the thinking component, that we can't really see, and the other is a behavioral component that we can really see. So for example, if we're talking about Abby Wambach, as an example, one of the most elite athletes in the world, we know that there are different components that go into her performance that are cognitive, and some that are behavioral as well. So the idea behind cognitive behavioral psychology is that our thinking will sort of impact our behavior, and that we can choose our thought processes before we go into a performance, and we can work on how we will react to those thought processes in game-like situations and in game situations that may impact our performance. For example, let's say that Abby gets called upon to do a penalty kick during a really key game in the lead up to the World Cup. She will have an entire imagery script before she steps up to that line to take the penalty kick. Just like any elite athlete who, say, gets called to the foul line in basketball to shoot key free throws at the end of the game. Or extra time, overtime, let's say in ice hockey, and you're the goalie and you have to stop shots in a shootout. Any athlete like this will have an imagery script, a thinking type script that they will have practiced in their mind many, many times before the performance happens, to help them to manage their anxiety, to help them succeed in their behavior, and to know exactly what to say to themselves to succeed. And these are some imagery examples of how to take the cognitive piece, the thinking piece, and have it turned into a behavior piece. The mental training, the imagery, is a huge component of excellent performance. We all know lots of examples of elite level performers who have either choked or tanked at the last minute before an actual, before a crowd of maybe 80,000 people or something, a skill that they've been able to do probably for 20 years that they suddenly could not perform. A second example in terms of cognitive behavioral psychology is in terms of goal setting. So if our thinking is a huge part of influencing our behavior, we all know that goal setting is an important piece. Like, let's say you're in the middle of the semester and you know you have 3 papers to start drafting and a test coming up. If you make yourself a list of the things you need to do, whether that's on your phone or on a sticky note, in your notebook, on your hand, wherever that is, and that you know that you can at least sleep the night before going into thinking about all these things you have to do, because cognitively you know that you're going to do them tomorrow or start them tomorrow, and they'll lead into behavior. So that's an example. Just making a list is an example of goal setting. So then you can check off those things on your list once you know you've done them. So in sport and exercise psychology, these are some of the key areas that sport and exercise psychology deals with: goal setting, imagery, having the thinking influence the behavior. And it's not just about sport either, it's also about exercise. So how and why do people stick with an exercise program? How and why do people continue to show up? And what is the long-term, perhaps, key to keeping people physically active? So this gives you just an introductory idea of where we're heading in the course.